Hey everyone, before I get started, I just want to remind you that if you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and then join the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community by clicking the link in the caption. Hey, good evening everybody, Militia Man and Crew, and I hope everybody had a good weekend. I think it was a pretty powerful one myself. We're going to get into a few things, but I'd like you guys to all know that Militia Man and Crew appreciates everybody being with us. And we really do appreciate you a whole lot because our community is smoking and it's on fire. Most often it's great. Everything seems to be, most everybody's on the same page. They see what's happening and it's real and it's very fascinating. This article out by Government Advisor, it says the digital sector is a driver of development and engine of economic diversification. This is mirroring, if you go back a few days, you can remember that al-Sudani said there's effectively no stopping it or no going back. No going back. Mohammed Saleh, the digital sector represents the most powerful engine for generating job opportunities for the youth, achieving sustainable development, and rapidly diversifying the national economy. Everything they're talking about is forward-looking. Establishing national digital platforms to support entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises, an important employment engine. Iraq's got like 60% of the population is the youth. So, emphasizing the digital economy is a true lever for economic diversification, given its superior ability to transcend geographical borders and traditional structures, and to connect Iraq, which is rapidly accelerating with the global economic system. They just keep, everything they're talking about is integration into the global financial system. It says this requires the development of a comprehensive sustainable development plans to build the economy of the future. This matter goes beyond being a mere economic process, becoming a strategic shift in the course of the state and society, and an irreversible project within the efforts to diversify the national economy. So right there is basically reiterating what al-Sudani said. They're at that stage now that there's no going back. They, like he said, they have come to a stage in their reform process that it's just too risky to not do it, and to not go through it is going to be a problem. It could very well be a big problem for them. And so they had to weigh where are they in this system? Can we stop now and then put it off for later? And the answer is no. That's exactly how it reads to me. It's very, very interesting because when they say when they use language like that, there's no going back, and it's irreversible. You should listen to that. It's really big. Okay, a tripartite agreement paves the way for the re-export of Kurdistan regional oil through SOMO, the state-owned oil company, and we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for a lot of this, and so we're going to go through a few things. But here this article says this tripartite agreement, what I mean by a tripartite agreement in this particular case, I think there's three tripartites, and I've talked about that. 2023-2024 budget, a tripartite, because that's three. And then you have the Kurdistan region, the center, and you also have the international oil companies. That's another tripartite, and that's what they're talking about here. It says that this tripartite agreement has been reached between the regional government, the central government, and the oil companies, noting that the agreement is scheduled to be signed next week, and which is coming up this, started today in Baghdad, but effectively in the coming days. The region's Ministry of Natural Resources expressed its approval last night. The Federal Ministry of Oil's observations, and the two parties signed a memorandum of understanding. It says the agreement stipulates that the region will retain 50% of the oil it produces for domestic use, while the remainder will be exported through the State Oil Marketing Organization, noting that the federal government will pay the oil companies dues, and the prices of produced barrel of oil was estimated at $16. Keep in mind, that's related to the tripartite budget. So that's two tripartite budgets, or two tripartite entities effectively involved. Ultimately, you think about it, you guys, to have the cost of production and marketing is part of that amendment, Article 12, 2, paragraph C. We haven't seen that exposed yet. But all the things that we're witnessing, and it even comes down to something that most people probably don't realize, is the CBI published some graphs and some documents regarding bonds and maturity dates. And one of those maturity dates is for Sukuk bonds, and you've seen in articles talking about they would like and need the Islamic banking to be on board with this project. And the last day for the maturity for September is tomorrow. And it's very important because it has implications to many different things. And if I have enough time, I'll get to what I can do the best that I can to explain that. But the bottom line is that it's very key. So lots of things are converging, just like I've been talking about. The oil to Turkey is big because it's going to move. Well, typically it's 400,000 barrels a day, and they're going to increase that. And when you increase that amount of oil, even if it offsets it in other regions, the bottom line is that oil is not going to be meant for say domestic use, but it's going to be going into Europe. And so if they can increase the oil supply, say to 1.5 million barrels to 2.2 million barrels a day, which is in print, they have a huge income stream, and that has leverage, and that's going to be done in a manner that we believe is, and I believe, is going to be in a digital format. And that means that they're going to be using new systems, new technologies, new monitoring, new transparency. All that stuff is going to be done through the third tripartite, which is digital technologies. And I think I've talked about that, and I think that digital technologies are going to be a big part of this because they all provide specific components. They provide liquidity, they provide speed and trade at low cost, and they also have security built in. Those three entities that I've mentioned, RLUSD, XRP, Hedera, are likely those three technologies that are going to be able to help facilitate this and make it all work. And they're going to be able to provide yield when it comes to the RLUSD, and they're also going to be able to provide speed, which is XRP, and then they're going to have security, which is Hedera. And those three tripartites mixed with, number one, the budget, 3-year, the tripartite agreement with the region in the center and the oil companies, and then the new technology to move the oil efficiently with transparency and extremely fast in transactions. So everybody's going to know their customer. It's going to have all international compliance. That will be a good thing for potentially joining the Bank of International Settlements, and also subsequently gives credibility to the BIS and even to the WTO. So those are things that are taking place as we speak, and we have a UNGA meeting in New York, and already today Rashid, the president, has met with the lead in the UNGA, and as we go, hopefully there's going to be some sort of talk from Rashid through his time that he's there. I think that there's some data that suggests that he may even have something to say tomorrow, which is the 22nd. Fascinating. But anyway, subsequently it goes on until to the 28th of this month. This article is called "The Central Bank and Monetary Policy Indicators for the First Half of 2025. It says the central bank's monetary objectives are to achieve growth and economic stability amidst the extremely complex economic, security, and political conditions the world is experiencing, impacting our country both positively and negatively. It goes on and says these indicators that confirm the need to support, activate, and revolutionize the real sector to contribute to sustainable development, address shortcomings in local production, and address the failure of local producers to meet citizens' consumption needs for food and other basic commodities. Kind of going through the basic stuff that they talk about. They're talking about control over illegal trade and informal border crossings. And they're talking about the inflation rate was one of the most prominent challenges facing monetary policy, directly impacting exchange rate stability. But we're going to see where they've covered all that. So it goes on by analyzing the monetary policy indicators for the first half of 2025. We note that the building of the foreign reserves of approximately 100 billion, the gold reserves of the central bank recorded a significant growth rate of about 55%. That's really big. As their value reached 22 trillion dinars during the same period compared to their value of 14.7 trillion dinars in the second quarter of 2024. So positive indicators. The decline in the issued currency. A declining issued currency means less supply. Less supply means supporting the exchange rate stability. It talks about the decline in the inflation rate also indicates a decline in the general price level as inflation recorded a low rate of 76%, reaching 0.8%. That's extremely exchange rate stability. It is exchange rate stability. That's bottom line, and the world's going to know that, and that's a really big indicator. Okay, that Iraq is ready to do what they expect, what we expect. Basically, it says this confirms the central bank was able to build basic pillars for monetary stability and achieve the most important objectives of their monetary policy. So obviously, they've been extremely successful, and to get to 0.8%, I think our country basically brags about that at 2 to 3%, which is probably to be argued, but especially if you go to the grocery store. Yeah, I think that's utter nonsense in my view. But the advisor, we're embarking on huge strategic projects. It says there are tremendous investment and economic opportunities in the country, in addition to an ambitious potential the world is looking to and advancing towards in the fields of mineral resources, human capital, and Iraq's geographical location. So we all know that they have a massive amount of minerals, and they have a very young population, grown immensely in the last 20 years, and their geographical location is centric to east-west, and it really is important. It says there are many investments, whether in the development path, the Grand Fa port, or other strategic projects, stressing that Iraq is keen on major projects that will open up many horizons for it in the regional and global levels. So it's not just focusing on a local, but it's talking about regional and global. There are many investments that they're dealing with. It says here, investors will be keen on major strategic projects in modern economic sectors such as those, again, mineral resources and mega projects. The government has created a suitable environment for investment through infrastructure projects, investment support, amending related laws, and developing a strategic vision all the way out to 2050. So that's a 2.5 decades that they're making a plan, and Al-Sudani is part of that. And all of this is focused on attracting investments, diversifying the economy, and escaping the rentierism it suffers. Rentierism is when they're all their main source of income is oil. So we all know they're converting over to oil and non-oil resources and revenues. It says there is a vision to develop to stimulate non-oil revenues through the transportation sector. Think of the TIR. It's already been running, and it's going to keep running. Via the Port of Fa, the development road, and the communication sector. Remember, communications is a lot. Now we've seen that they have e-signatures for contracts. All that oil is going to move. It's going to be on a blockchain. Things like that to think about. They have the tourism, agriculture, industry, and other sectors, in addition to an integrated vision for the government in this area. Basically states that none of this can be achieved through a single government effort unless it is done in partnership with the private sector through investment, whether foreign or local, and preparing for sustainable development. It says Iraq is an attractive country for investment and represents a turning point in terms of geographical location, as they already mentioned, and the availability of resources, natural resources, and human resources. It says all of these components will contribute to the emergence of new investments and diversification of the economy. Iraq is witnessing reform and change in the matter of diversifying the economy, revitalizing idle economic sectors, so they're rebuilding their factories and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty fascinating. Basically, I don't know, it sounds like to me they're beating a drum of progress. And like I think in the last 2 to 3 years, and then most definitely in the last couple of months, we've seen so much information that it's just it's been really pretty much off the charts. Chairman of the Media Commission, Iraq has taken significant steps towards digital transformation. All the new systems is part of that digital transformation. Electronic payments, getting electronic payments at the state and local. The state, what I mean by that is the payments for fees and all that stuff. The state is taking digital cards as opposed to cash, which is reducing the note count, by the way. It says the electronic signature initiative is in line with the government's program regarding the communications, automation, and digitization sectors, emphasizing that this step embodies the goals of the government program. And today we are reaping the benefits of the exceptional and important milestone, which was achieved after years of continuous effort and tireless work. So it sounds like they've done it. It's almost like past tense. Activating electronic signatures to support e-payment. There was a conference that was kicked off, and it looks like it was pretty successful. And basically, e-signatures are basically a component of Iraq's integration into the global financial system. Definitely. Because digital signatures, you can be in any country that you want doing a big, massive oil trade, and you can do a digital signature, which stands up in court, and it's all legal, and it's all good. Excuse me. The Ministry of Finance announces the commencement of a funding September salaries. Very short article, but if you actually get into the depth of it, you'll find that this is pretty powerful. But I'm just going to leave it at that. It says it has begun funding after completing all procedures related to the exchange regulation process. Basically, a regulation process is that, for instance, we haven't seen Tape Sammy always approving all the data because it hasn't been accurate. What they've done now is they have to, with a new system, is they audit all of that to make sure it's accurate. That's the exchange regulation process. There's a lot of process involved in making sure that there's no ghost employees, there's no corruption, there's no fraud. All of that stuff, they do all that. And so we're at that stage where I believe that they're completing all those procedures at that stage. So in other words, they're gearing up for an event. The statement called on all spending units in the ministries and governance and non-affiliated entities to contact the department to complete salary financing procedures while ensuring compliance with monthly financing requirements. Yeah, if you do a little research on what an exchange regulation process in the relationship of Iraq, you're going to find some really powerful information. I promise you that. At least I did. Okay. The Federal Council of State holds a meeting to discuss non-oil imports to the Kurdistan region. In brief, it says the State Council has concluded its meeting and prepared its report on this matter. After reviewing the report, it's scheduled to be sent today to the Federal Cabinet for an appropriate decision. It says a tripartite meeting is scheduled to be held today again, in the Ministry of Oil, the Ministry of Natural Resources, and the oil companies. So, the Ministry of Oil, Federal, Ministry of Natural Resources, all of that stuff, resuming oil exports from the Kurdistan region. So all those three were involved. The gal goes on and says, employees' salaries for the remaining months of the current year are linked to the joint agreement between the Kurdistan Regional Government and the federal government regarding non-oil imports and the resumption of oil exports from the Kurdistan region. So if you think about it right there, all of that's tied to those three tripartite budgets. That one sentence is it ties them all in. I think that's, it's just support that Militia Man and Crew have a really good study. And I think everybody should appreciate, I think you do appreciate that, but maybe you don't. But it's powerful, very good. If the federal cabinet receives the two reports on non-oil imports and oil exports, it will certainly decide to pay salaries to employees in the Kurdistan region during its regular session next Tuesday. So that's not tomorrow, but that's the next day. I believe that's the 23rd. And Rashid is in New York. And he's going to be doing what he does. But it's possible that he could have a communication tomorrow or have a talk into the UN that might be very important. But it turns out it happens to be that it could be on that same day. we're going to have to watch and see how it goes, but it's definitely getting very interesting on what's playing out. I'm looking forward to this week. We've just got to see how it works. KRG spokesman. It says tripartite oil agreement with Baghdad to be signed soon. It says the three parties have reached a consensus after extensive negotiations. The signing of the agreement is imminent. And if nothing unforeseen occurs, it will definitely be signed tomorrow. That's tomorrow. That's the 20th. Tomorrow's the 22nd, yeah. He stressed that under the terms of the agreement, the federal government must uphold its responsibility to disperse salaries to employees in the region. So here they've moved it up to where that not just coming soon, but in next week. Here, this gentleman here, his name is Peshawar Haramani, and he is a spokesman for the Kurdistan region, and basically using terminology like imminent and definitely be signed tomorrow if there's no problems. Catch that part? That's big. And I don't think there's any coincidences, everyone. I think that, that what we're seeing is really fascinating. Lastly, look, there's some salient points to all of this. Look, there's a tripartite MOU signing September 22nd, according to what I just read to you. Haramani confirmed consensus after negotiations that the Baghdad KRG IOC's deals links tomorrow, September 22nd, obviously if there's no hitches. So what are we watching for? We're watching for the SOMO and the KRG, and we're also watching for the budget, effectively, $16 a barrel federal benchmark. And we're also looking to see if they are going to pay the arrears, that $300 million to those companies. Basically what happens, it says the oil flows, they're talking about 230,000 barrels per day. But what does that do? It ends that 20 billion plus bleed out in cash. They're losing that much money. And they've been doing it since, or how, I'm not sure how, they say it's only 20 billion since March 2023, but I have a strong feeling that it's probably double that. I think we've already seen stuff in print that says that. But anyway, what is this basically doing? If they do all this stuff, it's basically supporting the value of their rear, and it'll also cover their salaries, which they pay $900 million a month. Okay, that's how much money. What else is there? It says that CB auction results expected on September 23. So those Sukuk bonds that I think Super Samson put out a chart on that, and the Sukuk bonds, the final maturity date is tomorrow. Okay, but they may not publish that information until the 23rd. Not unlike uncommon that Rashid, if he does a speech in, for instance, on the 22nd, you might not get that information until the 23rd. I find that to be very fascinating. And these bonds are kind of important because they are part of stability. They paid 5.5% yield. And what I talked about in the past too is that we might see these new technologies are going to help facilitate this trade in real time and very fast. One of those components is going to pay a yield. Maybe not that high, but it's going to be paying a yield. So ultimately, they're sopping up excess liquidity with these bonds. And so that's coming up to tomorrow. What else is there? The arrears, we talked about that. What does that tie into? It ties into testing e-signatures. That they talked about that Law 78/2012 for instant disbursements. And then how can they do that? Well, they have electronic payments. If you can't have disbursement until everybody's paid, and if that takes days and weeks to get money movement around the world, that's how long it takes. But ultimately, instant disbursements is the e-signature. They're both legal, and so they can do a trade, and it's that fast. Another thing is that these yields at 5.5% signal stability to the world, and then also 0.8%, they just talked about inflation rate, exchange rate stability. It's what it's about. And all of this is prepping digital currency pilots potentially, which is going to bring BIS involved, which is that Agora project, and also it's going to bring credibility to BIS and to the WTO because they're talking about a session. The BIS, they're talking about joining. So that's how that ties in. And then Rashid, he's at the UNGA speech, and that could be as tomorrow, it could be or 23rd to the 27th. And it talks about the, he's going to be at the general debate window they talk about. They talk about the, talking about unity because there was a delegation that was with Talabani. He's in the Kurdistan region. It talks about, again, the stability. It talks about low inflation. It talks about the 100 billion in reserves. It talks about gold. And basically, everything is standing for this progress. Just watch and see what happens. So ultimately, at the end of the day, Iraq is basically potentially fast-tracking, because of all this information, fast-tracking to the BIS being fully joined, if not already. We haven't been told. And obviously, there's still the forward-looking WTO. I believe that once they have a real effective exchange rate and they prove that they're moving with new technologies around the world, the Bank of International Settlements is going to be all over this, or be a part of it. The IQD system, for crying out loud, is a blockchain environment, and that's what they're going to be using. It's going to be big. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. So I thank you very much for being with us. If you liked my content, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll see you very soon. And by the way, having a little issue with the donations when it comes to that. Thank you very much for all your help. But PayPal is the one venue that we have at the moment. Okay, so thank you very much for being with us. Enjoy. Once again, guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you like this content. Subscribe to the channel or join us at the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community for even more exclusive content. You can also donate to this channel by hitting the links in the banner to help keep this page up and running. Your generous support is greatly appreciated, as always. Much, much appreciated. Thank you so much and have a great day.